Hello and welcome to the Savage Movie Night podcast. Today we are talking all about the 2021 movie Belle. I'm your nearly injuring those around me with my oblivious enthusiasm for my personal obsessions host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is my maniacally hustling to turn their friend into a viral virtual reality sensation co-host, Kristen. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Adam. How you doing?
Good. Always giving myself tongue twisters to introduce everybody.
Yes.
And of course, the show is never complete without our awkward info dump establishing the VR social platform that is a key plot point co-host, Rob. Hi, Rob.
Awkward.
Our question for part one is, what is your familiarity with Belle and its creator, Mamoru Hosoda? And more generally, how about Beauty and the Beast?
So, Belle was obviously my pick, and I chose it not having seen it. So, a lot of the time I usually pick a favorite, but this time I was like, oh, I've been interested in this movie. I really like animated films. I'm a really big fan of Japanese anime. So, all I knew was that a couple of my friends had liked it and that it involved music in some way. So, I really wanted to check it out. And the creator overall, I have only seen one other film from this director, and that's The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. I've had my eye on other ones from this director, but I haven't checked them out yet. But I definitely probably will after this podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a brave new world for me. I'm not familiar at all. And barely with Beauty and the Beast.
Well,
I mean, the classic Beauty and the Beast, I guess I forgot to answer that part, but that's like one of my favorite Disney movies ever. I love Beauty and the Beast.
So I've got two separate questions that I'll first, Kristen, had you seen any other version of Beauty and the Beast? Like, are you familiar with anything outside of the Disney version?
I have seen the live action one they did with Emma Watson. And I mean, like the Christmas Beauty and the Beast one, they did the like silly little offshoot. That's pretty much it.
Okay, but it's still kind of all the Disney ecosphere version of Beauty of the Beast. Like, you've never seen any other retellings. You're not necessarily familiar with, the 18th century French version that's the original or anything like that.
No, believe it or not, that is not in my repertoire.
Well, you never know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Just the way you phrased it, like 18th century French version. It's like, oh yeah, you know me. I'm just a scholar out here.
No. Because spoiler. I've done a lot of research into the origins of the Beauty and the Beast story that we just couldn't fit into the episode, unfortunately. But it was very interesting, and I had also just encountered slight variations on it throughout my life, in part because myself and my mom were kind of into folk tales and stuff, not super into it, but like going back and like reading some of the original Brothers Grimm and stuff like that. Like, most people now know only the Disney versions of a lot of these things, whereas I've seen, for a lot of these stories, I've seen either other versions or read other versions or a combination of those. So yeah, I was just seeing where you landed on that spectrum. So awesome. So Rob, what I was going to ask you is, I know you said you obviously knew nothing about the movie, or, hadn't seen it, knew nothing about the people involved. Had you ever seen an anime before?
Just Ghost in the Shell.
Okay.
Yeah, no, which is a classic, but I figured this wasn't really your genre. This wasn't really your jam. So, that you'll bring a very interesting perspective to it. So, we're glad you got dragged along with us through this.
You guys drag me through old ones, so I'm gonna drag you through some different ones too. Out of your comfort zone now, Rob.
Yeah.
All good. No, at times I felt like I was eavesdropping on someone else's movie.
It's definitely interesting, and we'll talk about that as we get into the movie itself. But today we are going to learn why Howl's Moving Castle was nearly very different, what the limits are for understanding an anime just from reading Wikipedia, and most importantly, how this all relates to the second most popular animal fighting simulator to come out of Japan in the 90s, because we are talking all about the 2021 anime Belle. But first, a word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, an in-depth 13-episode radio and live streaming series celebrating Billie Holiday's extraordinary musical legacy. The program explores her early life, groundbreaking singing style, and the powerful impact of Strange Fruit on the civil rights movement. It is produced by the award-winning Steve Robinson and written by NEA Jazz Grandmaster and host of Jazzology, Willard Jenkins. No Regret is narrated by Rhonda Hamilton. The series features interviews with Angela Davis, Cassandra Wilson, Beth Roars, Andromeda Toure, Phil Schaap, Dan Morgenstern, and many more. All episodes of No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, are now ready for you to stream on savagecontent.com/no regrets. That's savagecontent.com/no regrets. And now, back to the show. Mamoru Hosoda was born in 1967 in the town of Kimichi, which is part of the Toyama Prefecture in Japan. He grew up loving anime, even applying for a kind of high school internship but had to withdraw because of exams. He majored in oil painting in college and also joined a filmmaking club where he made a number of live-action projects. After graduation, he began seriously trying to make his dreams come true. He was able to get a job as an animator with major animation house Toei Animation in 1991. Toei Animation, then still known as Toei Doga, is the animation arm of Japanese media powerhouse Toei, one of the 4 big studios in Japan who are part of the MPA, and the studio behind series like Power Rangers, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and One Piece. Hosoda would work his way up the ranks, first working as an assistant director in 1993 and first working as a director in 1996. He would go on to direct a handful of episodes in 2 short films for Digimon. For the uninitiated, I'm looking at you, Rob. Digimon is an entire media franchise that started with the first release of Digimon or Digital Monsters in 1997. They were some of the first electronic pets, similar to Tamagotchi, which had been released the year before, but with a twist. Not only were they monsters instead of pets, but you could make them battle other people's Digimons. Kind of like Pokemon, but more real. And just like Pokemon, they eventually expanded into as many other media as possible, including a trading card game and anime. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was a huge property already. So despite the rise Mamoru had seen, it was still somewhat surprising, given his little experience overall and with the show in general, that he was tapped to direct the first Digimon movie, creatively known as Digimon the Movie, released in 2000. The movie was a success, and Hosoda's career couldn't seem brighter. He even had his next project lined up. He would be moving to this prestigious Studio Ghibli to direct Howl's Moving Castle.
As a fan of Howl's Moving Castle, that's interesting because I know that something will probably change along the way. But yeah, man, what a career! What an interesting career. And also learning for the first time how to pronounce that production company, because I always thought it was Toei. I've been a fan of like different stuff that they've put together. Obviously,
Yeah.
Sailor Moon. I love Sailor Moon.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go back and re-record that section, but I could have been slightly mispronouncing it. Toei. I've heard both
Oh, I'm not
ways.
sure. There's a chance that I've just been saying it wrong.
No,
my whole life.
that sounds right. It was just, when you're reading through some of this stuff, as we were kind of talking about before we started recording, sometimes when you can know how to pronounce a word that you're not super familiar with, but when you're reading it with a bunch of other words, it doesn't come out the right way. So I mean, even with words that are in English, even with words that I know, sometimes you slip up when trying to make everything smooth, and So if I got that one wrong, I apologize. If I get anything wrong in this episode, I apologize. I really am doing my best. But you can't edit audio. It's not like we could stop, retake that, and make it sound like we never had this conversation. I mean, It's just the nature of audio. There's no editing it, as Robert Evans from Behind the Bastards always tells us.
It's not like I'm writing down this exact time code so that Hobby can edit it out later or anything.
Well, no, I'm doing that bit so we can specifically keep this in.
I don't think we'll see.
I have a basic question.
Yes, sir.
At 11:35. So anime is. I thought that was the general classification of animated projects that come from Japan.
Correct.
But it seems like it feels like the artwork all has to be the same style.
No, I mean, because like if you look, like, I mean, honestly, Hosoda's style is very different than like the style you would see, even like Rob, you talked about Ghost in the Shell, or is different from the style you would see in Akira, or I mean, there are similarities, just like there are a lot of similarities between Western animation, especially here in America, and I certain artists are going to have their own style. So like a Miyazaki project is going to tend to look like a Miyazaki project. And then that, because he is synonymous with Studio Ghibli, that's going to kind of go into the rest of Studio Ghibli, regardless of if he is involved in it. Disney is going to have a Disney look and feel to most of the stuff, even whether it's Atlantis, the Lost Empire, or The Emperor's New Groove, or Aladdin, or Beauty and the Beast. And I'm
familiar with Ponyo. Is Ponyo considered anime?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
a Studio Ghibli production.
Yeah, that's Hayao Miyazaki, who we will be talking a little bit more about.
Yeah, there's definitely like a stylization for a lot of anime, but it definitely does vary based on the creator. I mean, one big example I can think of is there's a animated movie called Night Ashore Walk On Girl, and the way that the anime characters are drawn in that are a lot more sharp. It's not as like polished. It's just kind of like got this boxy look to it. So like it really does depend on the artist.
Well, and like Kristen, you mentioned you'd seen, which we will get to a little bit more later on, one of Hosoda's other movies, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. But like that art style is actually somewhat different to the art style he uses in this. That the art style he uses in this, I think, is closer to the Western stereotype of what anime looks like than like The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, there are times that feels a little more flat, a little less stylized than like this, even this in, when it's in the real world does. So there's more of a simplicity, a roughness to some of his earlier work than compared to like this one.
Yeah, that was a good question, Rob, especially since...
Thank you.
Well, and there's a whole debate over what constitutes anime as that animation style, because there is a lot about that style, presentation and artwork has then spread to other countries like the US, like South Korea, and around the world. And so then it brings up this question: is even when it's done in this style that clearly evokes, is meant to be like anime, does that make it anime? Or does it have to originate in Japan? Many people say it does have to originate in Japan. Others don't feel that way. Then you get weird things where like the outsiders outside of Japan will insist this thing is not anime. Like one of the good examples that we'll talk a bit more about because of some of the music related to it is Ruby, RWBY, which is an animated program about young girls fighting monsters, but produced here in America, but it has since been brought in and basically embraced like it's in Japan, like it's a locally made and considered part of, the same as other anime. So and they've then even done some of their own productions with the people who make anime, make Ruby. So it then becomes this whole thing of, does that retroactive, like, does their embrace of it make Ruby an anime, in quotes, or does it do it retroactively? Like, it's a whole classification that means something and doesn't mean anything at the same time. Keeping in mind, everybody listening to this has varying levels of understanding and familiarity with Japanese animation. I think this is a good discussion to have. So thank you, Rob. Now, many people listening to this are future people living many years after all this happened. If you're living in 2001, we need to talk. I have warnings. And as future people, we all know that the whole Howl's Moving Castle thing did not work out for Mamoru. By 2002, just 1 year after the announcement of the project, Hosoda exited and was eventually replaced by Hayao Miyazaki. There are conflicting reports about why Mamoru left, was replaced. Some say he was overly responsive to endless notes from Miyazaki. Some have said the project was understaffed at the time because of Spirited Away sucking up too many resources, while Hosoda himself has pointed to his own pride leading to isolation and a problem asking for help/advice. But that's still kind of vague, doesn't really describe what issues he was having that would have needed more help, advice, that kind of thing. Whatever happened, he was out, and his once promising prospects seemed a little dimmer. Hosoda returned to Toei Animation and worked on things like a Louis Vuitton short and anime series in general again, a return to the trenches after his exile from the heavens. It was his work on one of the shows that led to his next big project, the series Ojamajo Doremi Dokkan, was run by a friend of his, and he used the opportunity to make something personal about his time at Studio Ghibli. In a veiled way or something. Look, I'm getting a lot of this from Wikipedia, and this is a show in its fourth and final season. Or more properly, series, as most countries that aren't American term it, about elementary school girls who become witches apprentices, and the description starts: the series deals with the sudden growth of Hana, who has aged herself voluntarily, and I just start to tune out. Anyway, whatever the hell the show or Hosoda's episode was about, it made an impression. Maso Moriyama was co-founder and at the time president of animation studio Madhouse. He saw the episode and it reminded him of a book called The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, whose rights he had recently acquired, and thought Mamoru would be great for the adaptation he was planning.
I don't know. Sounds like a good show to me. I don't need to tune out. Yeah, just made me Google it because I was curious about it. I love witches.
It's not the witches part, it's the voluntarily ages herself up that is not only weird, but starts to borderline into the creepy, and I don't want to know or understand more. I'm just leaving.
Oh, yep. We don't have to get into all of the Japanese storylines of making a child 400 years old, so it's okay to think they're hot. I hate it. We don't have to get into all that.
Yeah, no, that's why I was just Homer into the bushes, fading back. Like, I'm not trying to understand this anymore. It's also making my head hurt and break. And so we are just moving on. I'm going to accept, instead of trying to do more diligent research, that somehow he was making a personal statement with this episode that touched and moved people about his experience, and just go from there. So,
But the age voluntarily makes me like, you could argue that he is saying that he aged 10 years working briefly for Studio Ghibli.
well, no. So
Maybe that's it.
so that's not even the description of his specific episode. That's a description of part of the, like, of what's going on in the season. Essentially that the seasons. the main season story arc is she does this at the start of the season, and then that kicks off whatever the hell else is going on, that my brain just went, no, we're leaving, and I'm taking the rest of you with me. And Rob, so I think we'll back up, because I had a lot of jokes in that first paragraph, but for people who, and we're blowing through a lot of information just because this is a average to on the longer side production script as it is, for this section on how we normally cover it. But for people who don't know, Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away are both classic now animes from Hayao Miyazaki, who is one of the legendary all-time great Japanese animation filmmakers. That for people listening to this in like January of 2025, his most recent, The Boy and the Heron, won the Oscar at the Academy Awards in 2024. He is known for many legendary projects, but Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle were some of the first that helped really start to break him in the U.S. That they were some of the first that were able to be distributed in real time, or as close to real time with only a short delay here in the U.S. So, as kind of Kristen said, at the break from the last part, where, when I said he would be moving on to direct Howl's Moving Castle, anyone who's familiar with that project and Miyazaki's work knows that, oh, that's not going to end too well. So,
Yeah,
but
Miyazaki, total legend.
yeah.
I love his work.
One of the things this year I've been doing, in my effort to watch more movies, is watch more Miyazaki movies in general. So I've watched like, I know it doesn't sound like that much, but I've watched like 6 Miyazaki movies, including Moving Castle and Spirited Away and The Boy and the Heron this year so far. They are all very good, very fascinating, very interesting. It's also interesting to see reoccurring themes and stuff like that. Yeah, no, it would have been a very different movie if, one, just in general, if Hosoda had done it, but two, because the production on it ran so long that it was dragged out because of Hosoda leaving and Miyazaki coming on. Howl's Moving Castle ended up being very much an anti-war piece, because by the time it was being worked on, we not only had the war in Afghanistan going on, but we'd invaded Iraq, and the invasion of Iraq really influenced a lot of what Miyazaki had to say with Howl's Moving Castle. And so without that influence, it would have been interesting to see how much of a very different film it would have been, even more so. So,
Is there anything that we should be aware of as it pertains to the differences between production length on an anime feature versus sort of your typical non-anime? Is it
I mean,
equivalent?
well, I mean, it's not equivalent. That the production on animation is much longer. A director is going to be tied up for years on an animated project, and they're not really going to be able to juggle projects the way you even see some, like Ridley Scott, had The Duel and House of Gucci come out in the same year. You're rarely going, if ever, going to see that on high level, big time animated projects, just because they, especially, these visionary kind of directors, they're just too involved in every step, and it takes too long. That pre-production requires a lot of work. The production itself, you maybe save a little bit of time in the post-production because you've done so much work in the pre and during the production itself. But for the most part, you're, like the shortest gap between films he has is about 3 years. So it's, it looks like it takes him about 3 years to, make one of these. The film version of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, released in 2006, while based on the 1967 novel of the same name, only took the loose premise of a high school-aged girl discovering she had the power to rewind time and reliving slash redoing moments. The film included a new plot and characters. In the film, Makoto Kono learns she has the power to relive and change the events in her past, and does so before learning of the consequences and ultimately growing and changing. The film was a hit, and suddenly Hosoda was back, baby. He would do his follow-up and first truly original film, even though The Girl Who Leapt Through Time was mostly original, with Madhouse, 2009 Summer Wars. The film's success led Mamoru to create his own studio, Studio Chizo, in 2011, and it produced his next film, Wolf Children, in 2012. He followed it up with The Boy and the Beast in 2015, which told the story of a boy who, after his mother's death and his father's not reappearing, is forced to live with relatives he despises. He flees and lives on the streets before eventually being taken in by one of the most powerful masters in the Beast Kingdom. Master is kind of a deadbeat jerk, but he and the boy grow and improve together, and it's overall great. His follow-up, 2018's Mirai, earned him his first Academy Award nomination and continued his streak of commercial and financial success. For his next movie, he set his ambitions too high and decided to reimagine Beauty and the Beast.
What a he's got so many different really cool movies in the repertoire, because obviously Studio Ghibli movies are what people think of when they think of animated movies, but what Mamoru's doing is very unique and different. I think that now obviously he's had the commercial success, but I think even anime fans kind of see him as a special kind of different type of animated movie. When you kind of want something a little different than a Studio Ghibli movie, I think sometimes they have a little more grit, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But
he's doing great work, but you also see a lot of luck, a lot of getting a lot of chances that, it feels like, maybe not a lot of other people would, uh, uh, not to say he's not deserving of those chances, that, he, but, it was sort of like some of what we were talking about in the Toys episodes last month, where Barry got some of the, while he proved himself, with his ability, he also just got a lot of lucky breaks that most people couldn't count on, about, being in the right place, meeting the right people, finding the right supporters. And a lot of what I'm, going through here is, just summarizations over, what he had to kind of overcome. So, there definitely is a world where, you know, uh, uh, he was this rising star, went to Ghibli and fell, or he didn't even get to Ghibli, or there are a lot of ways this could have not worked out for him.
Yeah, that's usually how it ends up. You just right movie, right time, or right people backing it and stuff, and it works.
Yeah,
It pays off.
yeah. But I watched, as research for this, I watched as many of his movies as I could easily find. And so I watched The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, The Boy and the Beast, and Mirai, in addition to Belle. And personally, of those first three I mentioned, and we'll talk then later about how Belle compares to all that, The Boy and the Beast was probably my favorite. That I thought that was the strongest of them, but they were all very good, and would recommend, people check them all out. That they're strong storytelling, strong voice acting, whether you're watching the dubbed or the subbed. Uh, Summer Wars and Wolf Children, I would like to check out. They just weren't easily available to me.
Yeah, I've heard the best things about Wolf Children. I just haven't gotten around to that one either.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've
No,
heard really good things about that one.
I've heard really good things about Summer Wars too. Unfortunately, not easily available at the moment on the services and I have and the places I could rent and buy things. So, but it was funny. The Boy and the Beast. When watching that, because I think I was watching it on a plane. So like I couldn't like look up stuff about the cast until I landed. And the voice of the Beast is very good, but he sounds a lot like Ed Asner to the point I was shocked when I discovered it was not Ed Asner. That was fun. Rob, anything we're saying making you want to go check some of these out later?
I feel like I'm watching tennis.
It feels like you're listening to people talk in another language without subtitles, I'm guessing.
Totally. Like, there's times I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Other times I don't know if this is a joke or this is real. So I'm just paying
Rob,
attention.
this is actually, we're recording our April Fool's episode. None of this is real. So, backing up a bit, had you ever even heard of Digimon before?
Yes.
Okay, so you know at least one thing I've talked about here is real. Digimon is a real thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But
He
you're right.
knows it's real because he watched the movie.
Everything else sounds like you just made it up.
According to my pronunciation, people could think I'm making it up because I'm just that wrong with things. But Hosoda was fascinated by the classic tale Beauty and the Beast and its many iterations over the centuries. He wanted to bring it into the 21st century and, quote, what does it mean, or what is the meaning of beauty, and what does it mean to become a beast? He also wanted to explore our ever-evolving relationship with technology and the internet. And he wanted to make it a musical, despite no experience himself and the Japanese animation industry as a whole having little to no experience creating musicals. Hosoda faced challenges on this front, from concern over how his main audience, those in Japan, would receive a musical as they have less of a local musical tradition and next to none in anime, to how to actually create a musical. In the end, he was forced to create the musical sequences the opposite of how they are usually created in the West, which has a greater musical tradition, especially in animation. And when we're saying musical tradition, we're talking about musicals, not like a tradition of actually being musical or playing music, just the genre of musicals. They don't have that tradition. In Hollywood, they will create the music and lyrics and then storyboard and animate based around them. Mamoru storyboarded everything, getting the sequence just right visually and emotionally for the story, before working with songwriters to create something to fit. We will talk about the cast when going through the film itself, but one thing Hosoda was insistent on was that the lead needed to be able to handle all the singing, and they had to have the musical talent to be believable. Again, this was a different approach than is often taken, as in many animated musicals, and even some live action ones. An actor who is most suited to the role from a straight acting or visual or star power standpoint, often some combination of all three, is selected, and then someone else does the singing. Spoiler, Matthew Broderick, a Broadway caliber singer, didn't sing his own songs in The Lion King. Mamoru also sought out collaborators, turning it into an international production, unusual for a Japanese animation project. Jin Kim is South Korean and became the first ever Korean animator for Disney, working his way up from TV shows like Darkwing Duck and Goof Troop to character design for Tangled and character design supervisor for Big Hero 6. Hosoda also worked with Irish animation studio Cartoon Saloon to create backgrounds for the virtual spaces in the film.
So something that I didn't realize, even within Lion King, that there was a different singer versus the voice actor. I mean, it makes sense in hindsight when I think about the movie, but it hadn't even occurred to me. Because while you were reading that part of the script, I was like, well, of course they're going to have somebody who's doing the voice acting that's also going to do the singing. But that's what I've always thought makes the most logical sense. But apparently in America, we're doing things backwards.
It,
We're doubling up on work.
it's a mixed bag. So especially a lot of times for the celebrities in those Broadway style uh, Disney stuff, like Kate Donovan in Hercules, I don't believe is doing his own singing. I don't believe Tony Goldwyn is doing his own singing in Tarzan. However, I do remember, and this is one of those weird things that lodges in the brain, because I was like 12 at the time Pocahontas came out. I remember like some of the big promotional stuff was Mel Gibson did his like insisted and did his own singing for that piece, and that they even admitted that was highly unusual at the time. But this also goes back like decades. I think it's Singing in the Rain. I think it's Debbie Reynolds doesn't actually do her own singing in that. Um, that it covers live action too, that it's that they'll ghost sing for people. Going back, Kristen, to our never to talk about episode, The Apple, if you remember, they talked about Catherine Mary Stewart. They had a ghost singer for her because again, it wasn't that she was bad, she just wasn't at the caliber they needed for the performance.
Yeah, and that seems to be the thing, is like the level that they want the songs to convey something. So I guess it really just depends on the project. But I think it was a good move and an interesting move for Belle, the movie, to have somebody that is doing the voice acting and also singing, both for the English dub and the sub. Very cool from both like the Japanese and the English perspective, that they managed to find people that I think fit really well with the like vibe of what the character's going for.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like having that, like being legit was also like, if you remember back to the Light of Day episode, something Paul Schrader was very insistent on, which is how we ended up with Joan Jett in the lead role. That he wanted someone who was a believable rocker, not just a poser
Right.
in that part. Rob, any thoughts?
Just more questions.
No,
Manga.
but
What is
I
the
mean,
difference between manga and anime?
manga is
Think
like
of it like
Japanese.
comics,
Yeah,
basically. That's easiest comp is to think of it like a comic book, but it reads the opposite direction. But it's like little comic panels. So that is like books. So usually if an anime gets an adaptation, it's usually from an original source material manga. Not every time, but a lot of the time it is an
yeah.
adaptation from it.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are some anime that are completely original. There are some that are from source material. If it's from source material, it is more often than not from a manga. Think of it as the equivalent of like going from X-Men to X-Men the animated series.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
It's interesting to hear to see in the material I was reading, people talk about like they just don't have a tradition of doing musicals in Japan, both in movies and just in the country in general. Um, and they also, uh, and so that affected, the approach. And I can see, one, I definitely see how, why Hollywood and the West tends to go with their approach, but I can also see benefits from going with the approach Hosoda did, even if it seems somewhat backward and counterintuitive.
And honestly, when you think about other Japanese anime out there, like even with we have got theme songs for our TV shows, but not very often are they things that you're going to see on the radio charts or things like that. And that's not necessarily true for anime. There are a lot of anime songs, like songs made for anime or that feature in the opening or closing track, that end up making it big outside of the anime, within the radio charts, within the download charts, whatever. So doing it this method makes a lot of sense, for given what you know about how the other like studio stuff works over there, with creating, like, picking songs that kind of go with a vibe versus like basically doing it the opposite of what we were saying. It's not that surprising when you think of it from that perspective.
Yeah, well, and the West has just an interesting relationship with very commercially created music, in itself, music that's created for properties, because there have been, from live action shows here in the US, there have been the occasional theme song that would break out and become a hit song on its own, but it is rare. Um, like Greatest American Hero, with William Catt in the 80s. That theme song, Believe It or Not, I'm Walking on Air, that became a radio hit, a big radio hit in its day. Um, the Rembrandts theme song from the song from Friends was a huge radio hit in its day. Although I'm not even sure that was originally written for Friends. That might have been originally written by them for their album, and then Friends bought it, which makes it an interesting, like, it got big because of Friends, but it's this weird straddling the line because, just overall, even if we like theme songs here in the West, even if they resonate with us and we listen to them a lot, uh, we kind of separate them out and don't count them as music, in the same way we would count, a song from Madonna or Taylor Swift or, anyone else like that.
And definitely there are the occasional times where a big artist will do a theme song for a US show of some sort, but it's not that common, like, for you to bring somebody that is like a well-known artist. Like, you're not going to catch a theme song being created by Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter very often.
Yeah.
But that seems to be a little different within Japan, where a lot of the time it's like artists that are kind of like have a good
Mm-hmm.
following, pretty big, and then they're approached to create an anime. Actually, that happened with a Western artist recently. This is getting into a side tangent. I'll be brief. But
Yeah.
like, One Republic did a opening song for, actually no, the closing track. And yeah, there's two. So there's Youngblood did the opening for Kaiju number 8, and then One Republic did the closing track for that anime. So
Okay.
that's not very common for Western artists to do anime songs at all. But yeah, like, so that's like one anomaly. But yeah, a lot of the time it's like a big Japanese artist that they are approaching, saying, "Hey, will you write this song for
Well,
our anime?"
a Western artist I could see definitely not only being approached to do it, but actively campaigning to do it, is Megan Thee Stallion, because she
Yeah,
has been very vocal about her fandom of anime. And
that would be interesting. That'd be fun. Yeah, because like,
yeah,
I was surprised when One Republic, like, they posted a video like, yeah, we were approached to do it, and I was like, huh, because like, when you hear it, I don't associate it with One Republic. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't feel like their other music, but it works. It's really good.
Well, from a business perspective, the other aspect that's really interesting with Japan is that, like, their version of fandom when it comes to music, you know, we're so past this, but in Japan, physical media still
hmm,
sells very
Oh
well.
yeah.
yeah.
So you could package and put in other value added into a CD or a DVD or any other format, and it actually sells, even though the music can be shared digitally and streamed. And the way we look at it as a shortcut in this market, as a way to not have to pay for something, it's not looked at like that over there. They value the tangible products.
I wish we still did, honestly.
I mean, like, I can see it both ways with tangible versus digital. I mean, there's a lot of convenience and stuff that I love about the digital, and in a lot of ways, it's the future we've always dreamed of. Like, I remember, this is probably about 30 years ago, sometime in the mid '90s, there was a series of AT&T commercials. It might have been from like their Bell Labs arm, where it'd be like having a watch phone, or being at home and being able to select any movie you want to watch from your screen and stuff like this. And it just seemed like far out future sci-fi stuff that you only see in movies and is never going to work in real life. And to realize that we're actually living in that future now is kind of cool to remember. And it is really cool to be able to take everything everywhere, not have to deal with ripping stuff and things like that. But also having physical media is cool. You don't have to worry about them changing the version on you, stuff like that. So I mean, there's positive and negatives everywhere. Nothing's perfect, man. But yeah, I think it would be really cool to see Megan the Stallion do an anime theme song.
I actually thought and I agree with you. I actually thought that was the direction that Kanye was going, that he was going to, when he was doing so much work with, Murakami. I know that he's not a musician, but from the artwork, but it was just getting closer and closer to that world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
and actually, there were some shorts created. Actually, that's right.
And there's a chance it could still happen. They're making new anime all the time. It would have to fit the vibe, though. Like her music would have to fit the vibe.
I know, just because I follow her on Instagram, and so I know, like, as of recording this, she was in Japan not that long ago. I don't think, obviously, even if it was for that, she wouldn't be able to say until it was the proper time. But you never know. So, yeah, no, it's interesting. And of course, I thought it was cool to see, Hosoda kind of, and I think it's reflected in the ultimate look of the film, that the look of the film is kind of different than the other Hosoda projects I've seen. Um, uh, in that he was working with Jin Kim, he was working with Cartoon Saloon, and also for me, just reading Jin Kim's background, especially a lot of the TV shows he worked on were big parts of my growing up, like Darkwing Duck and Goof Troop and stuff like that. So, with everything we've talked about, the film was also completed under the tension of the COVID-19 pandemic and released on July 16th, 2021, when people were just returning to normal life. But more often than not, box offices were waiting to rebound. Would this be something to get people into the theater? Well, let's buy our ticket, get some popcorn, and head in to see for ourselves. Kristen, take us through the plot.
And so to begin, Adam mentioned it a little bit in his introduction, but the film opens with a little bit of an info dump. It starts with the song You by Millennium Parade, also an artist that has done a couple of animated songs. So they introduce You in this beginning. It's a virtual community created by 5 architects known as The Voices, and the platform has 5 billion users. With body sharing technology, the app auto-generates an avatar based on your biometrics called an AS, another you / another self, basically. And the world of You is an opportunity for people to start their lives over. So while we get this explanation of the world in the opening scene, we also see an avatar in a bright red dress, pink hair. She's singing to thousands of other avatars in this world, and she's riding on a whale equipped with speakers. So before we go forward, I want to just get first impressions. What did you guys think of the setup, the concept, the look, the animation, that kind of thing?
When I saw the whale and speakers, I had to check myself. Never mind. Never mind. I'm not going to say what I was about to say.
You had to check and make sure you hadn't accidentally dropped acid and didn't realize it.
I was like,
so you have to have stuff in realism. Is that it? You can't have the.
No. I thought I took the wrong gummy. No, it was really cool. It was cool.
I'm telling Gloria,
right? One of the things that I immediately just I recognize, I'm not making an issue of it, but it's really interesting. This is not a new phenomenon. We're aware of it. But what the standard of beauty is and what is considered beautiful, I'm not seeing your typical Japanese, features. And maybe that is the point, because half of this is her being completely different, and you're giving a new identity when you enter the You app, right? You're getting this chance to start life over again as a whole new identity. So I get that, but it's always kind of been an interesting thing how like the standard of beauty is the tall blonde.
Well, beauty standards are very interesting all over the world, how they vary, how they're similar, how they are influenced by other cultures, especially American culture, which is so dominant all over the world thanks to our movie exports and stuff like that. But it also is, and especially in Japan, with its relationship with America post World War II, is always awkward, and how we've influenced things there. But and that gets into, there's been this long history throughout anime of sometimes characters looking very Western, and whether that's a thing influenced by some of what we're talking about, some of by like cultural imperialism or whatever you want to call it, or actual occupation of there, or what might be influencing that, or if that's just our Western eyes reading things into art choices that the native artists do not see the same way. Uh, um, and that is a long running debate within, again, anime circles outside of Japan, I believe, even to a certain degree, anime circles within Japan. I'm not qualified to settle it one way or the other. Just letting you know, Rob, that what
Right.
you have noticed is something people have been noticing for decades and commenting on, and reevaluating and stuff like that. So
Yeah, but
But
that being said, it was all very creative. Sorry, yeah.
right. No, you're fine. What I was just going to mention was like, maybe I could see what you guys are saying with the features, but like with the kind of bright pink hair kind of look, that is also a pretty common thing found in a lot of anime. Like a lot of anime, you're going to see these like outrageous colored hairstyles, hair looks, and everything like that. So I think that it's kind of like an amalgamation, and maybe that is the point too, because it's this world with 5 billion users worldwide. Maybe it's kind of this amalgamation of a couple of different looks, and it's like, like a general kind of standard of beauty that she's kind of, because it's not like she's choosing what she, like it looks like. It's the algorithm changing it.
the whole way this you operates, one, like it's fine for the purpose of the movie. Like it's only like later that if you're really like over analyzing it, like it just wouldn't work on a level of how we've seen social media platforms, like because we've seen certain real life social media platforms try and implement some of the things that they're implementing here, and they just don't work. Such as tying one person very strictly to one account, or like how the avatar creation works, and some of those other things. And but I also understand like it's kind of needed, that like it needs to operate that way strictly for the plot, and that's fine.
Yeah, and I don't think we're kind of going for realism here, much like we're not looking for a actual moving castle like in Howl's Moving Castle, like you kind of have to have a little suspension of disbelief. You have to accept the world building in this particular world. And like
So
it's an interesting one, that's
at
for
this
sure, like this
point, like
world.
especially like those kind of takes on like social media and stuff is essentially like the equivalent of you notice it, you point it out to yourself, like in an action movie where they never seem to ever need to reload, and even if they are reloading, seem to have infinite bullets, reloads on them, despite like being in just jeans and no shirt. So I mean, it's just something you have to live with.
Yeah, and I kind of see it more as like kind of like a dystopian kind of look at social media when they do these kind of things like this. It's like this kind of dystopian kind of like, what if we could do this? That would be crazy. Like, because as we see throughout the movie, like it's not the greatest like platform. Like it has good intentions, but like there's definitely holes in the thing, and much like with a certain character coming on that tries to take control, blah blah blah. But we'll get into all of that later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So next up here in the plot, so we've got this introduction of the world, and then we are introduced to our main character. Her name is Suzu Naito. She's a third-year high school student living in the rural Kochi prefecture of Japan. And our first look at her shows a girl jaded by her reality. And she is going to school in this kind of opening scene. It's like moving very slow, quiet existence. Gales of Song is the song that is kind of played in the background as she's getting on the bus and then the train, and then she's reaching campus. And I really like this opening scene. There's this really great juxtaposition of like her silent route onto the loud chaos of school. There's all this chatter, the jazz band is playing, and in this opening scene of the school, students are gushing over the sax player and popular girl Ruka Watanabe, who is like the sun that everyone revolves around. According to Suzu's friend, Hiroka, Hiro is what she's typically called. And so Suzu is, according to Hiro, the opposite, the far side of the moon, so ignored people forget she exists. And so you kind of get a feel for kind of what Suzu is like. She's kind of like not very well known, kind of quiet, keeps to herself, and we do kind of learn a little bit more about why that is. But before we get into that, I do want to call out some other characters that we meet in this opening school scene. And one of them is her childhood crush and self-appointed protector, Shinobu Hisatake. And then the sportsman, Shinjiro Kamishin Chikama. And so those are two that play a role a little bit later. But the Kamishin one makes me laugh because he's trying to get people to join his canoe club and freaking people out. And it sets up just like a general school vibe of what it's like. And yeah, that's where we begin. We kind of get those introductions.
Kamicha, her friend, who's head of the kayak club, and its only member, is like got like a part of a kayak on him and a big paddle and a big sign, and is doing like the comedy ladder spot where he's spinning around and nearly hitting people, and being oblivious to he's such a danger, but is so enthusiastic about trying to get people to join the kayaking club, and also talking probably later in the film. But talking about like he's on track to potentially get a kayaking scholarship, which is that I'm not sure that might be a thing in Japan. I can't think of that ever hearing of that as a thing in the U.S. I know technically, I think kayaking is part of the Olympics, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if it's regarding the Olympics, maybe that is the case. But yeah, he's an interesting one. Oh man, of all the characters, you get really interesting ones. But while we're talking about Kamishin, let's talk about the Japanese voice actor for him. I think the English voice actor wasn't really anybody that like I seem to really be familiar with or could find much information on. But the Japanese voice actor was Shota Somitani. And Somitani, my apologies. And so, like I was just saying, there aren't many Japanese actors from the cast that maybe you guys would be familiar with, that the general listeners would be familiar with. But if you are a person who watches anime, Somitani, he has been in another Mamoru Hosoda film, The Boy and the Beast. So he has that connection. So he has worked with Mamoru before. And other fans of Japanese manga might also recognize him for his leading role in the live-action adaptation of the manga series Parasite. And he's also received the Screen International Rising Star Award at the 14th Annual New York Asian Film Festival in 2015. So he has a little bit of familiarity, I guess, with Western audiences. Some people might recognize some of what he's been in.
Yeah, well, and the version of The Boy and the Beast I watched was the only one available from iTunes, and that was the English dub. So that was what I saw. So I did not get to hear him.
Yeah, so this one may be a little different than our other episodes, just because since there is an English dub, but there's also the Japanese original as well. We're kind of going over both types of actors for this, ones that have different things. So just for listeners that might be a little confused, there's obviously a Japanese version that is subtitled with English subtitles, and then there is an English dub that is also very common out there. I watched it both ways. I think Rob and Adam both watched it dubbed, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so, and for me, like when I watch anime in general, I go back and forth. Sometimes I do subs, sometimes I do dub. Um, so for this one, uh, uh, like this one, the first watch through, I had the subs on while watching the dub and comparing what they were saying. And since I felt like they were following the subs fairly well, I didn't feel the need to switch to the dub.
I think the big
So,
difference, the thing that makes it really what was important and eye opening for me to watch it both ways was the singing. The singing portions are obviously very different because obviously they're going to sing in English versus Japanese, and there's different voice actors. So obviously, in the Japanese version, the actress and singer, like we talked about, where they've got them for both roles, is done by Kano Nakamura, and she is a singer-songwriter, voice actress. She released her debut EP back in 2014, and her music's generally like R&B and soul, but she also includes some experimental pieces that branch into other genres. But she doesn't really seem too big, too well known, but very interesting in comparison to the English version, the voice speaking and singing voice they did for English.
The English version, the speaking voice and the singing for Suzu, and this is important to remember that Suzu and Belle are the same person. That the English version was done by Kylie McNeil is her name, a singer-songwriter based in New York City. Well, I should say going back and forth between New York and LA quite often. Kylie was featured in the New York Times as a finalist for the Mabel Masur Foundation's 31st annual cabaret convention titled "The Future of Cabaret," and was profiled in Variety for her performance in Belle. Her other credits include runways at New York City Center Encores and the Delacorte Theater, as well as the Public Theater's gala performance of "From Hair to Hamilton."
Yeah, I really liked both versions a lot. Like now, since I watched both, like I think I really liked. I loved what Kylie McNeil did with the stuff, especially because there's lots of interviews out there about like how she went about trying to like capture the emotion that the original Japanese voice actress did.
well, and just the sound, the music, and her voice, and how it incorporated everything. Setting aside the lyrics, like I really enjoyed, but also really reminded me again. I mentioned Ruby earlier. At least the music for the first couple seasons, which I think the singer was Cassie Lee for a lot of that. So like to the point like when I was watching it the first time, I had to look up like to make sure it wasn't Cassie Lee or whoever had done this singing vocals on the Ruby soundtrack stuff because it sounded so similar, which is a good thing because like that's music I like. I've listened to, like just in my regular rotation because I enjoy it. So.
Yeah, yeah, I think she did a great job, and obviously you guys didn't really hear much of it, but maybe look up afterwards a couple of just like on YouTube some of the Japanese versions because I think sometimes I find myself listening to a lot of like songs from Japanese anime. I find it
Hmm.
calming. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
crazy because it doesn't always work that way for like different languages, but there's something about like the Japanese language when they sing that's just like very
yeah,
calming to me. So I really enjoyed being able to like hear it both ways.
yeah.
But yeah,
There's
definitely
actually
both.
I think there was a lot of moments where it was very calming, especially when you
Mhm.
see the kind of everyday life, like the moments of when she's walking home, or
Mhm.
there's moments near her home where there's a whole lot of greenery around her. Like it's first, it's very pleasing to look at, but it's also very calm.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I got that takeaway as well. I think
Well,
you mentioned Ruka, and I just want to chime in. I don't think you mentioned the Japanese, so I'm going to start with the English voice actor for Ruka. Um, Ruka Watanabe is played by Hunter Schafer. Hunter Schafer made her acting debut as a transgender high school student, Jules Vaughn, in the HBO teen drama TV series Euphoria. Since then, she had roles in this film, but also in The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds, and Snakes, Cuckoo, and the Kinds of Kindness. I don't know what that is.
That's
Which one? Kinds of Kindness? That's a new
yeah,
one.
that's the latest from I'm not going to butcher his name. It's the director who did The Favorite and Poor Things. And so it also has a lot of people he's worked with in the past, like Jesse Plemons and Willem Dafoe and Emma Stone and people like that.
It's a long one. It's like, I think 3 hours or something. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's on Hulu. It's on my list to check out because I've been meaning to see it. I just haven't gotten around to it.
But yeah, I was very surprised to see Hunter Schafer listed in this because I really like her in pretty much every role. Like I haven't seen Kinds of Kindness, but everything else that she's been in, I've seen her in. Really, really liked her in Cuckoo. That was a horror movie that came out this year that was really, really well done. Very interesting.
I know of her. I have not seen anything she has been in. I've only heard good things about her work. So, up until this, I thought she did a very good job here. So.
Yeah, and so the Japanese voice actress for Ruka is obviously someone else, Tina Tamashiro, and she is a Japanese actress known for films like XXX Holic, Alamok, Dolmen X. None of those are familiar to me, but I'm sure they're popular Japanese films. But she's also done voice acting in the anime The Way of the House Husband, that's like on Netflix, the little tiny little bite-sized episodes. And she's also part of the live action adaptation of Shuzo Oshimi's manga series Flowers of Evil. If you guys have not heard of Shuzo Oshimi, he has got some crazy, disturbing stories out there. Very interesting. But so I thought that was fascinating to see that she's done stuff within the anime sphere and also the live action different developments. But yeah, very, very cool cast. And one other person we haven't talked about yet is another character that is kind of always in the background. I don't even know if I would call him a main character. He's kind of just there. Shinobu Hisatake. He's the one who very clearly Suzu has a crush on, which I get. We didn't really explain that in the plot thing, but yeah, she has kind of been into him since they were kids, and it's because when they were like 6 years old, he said that he would protect her, and so she's like, he basically proposed to me, and so she has that close relationship with him, and he has always kind of kept an eye on her, especially after something that will come in the plot that we won't spoil quite yet.
Yeah,
but the Japanese actor that voices him is Yo Narita, and he is best known for the award-winning animated film Your Name, Talking the Pictures, and Cornered Mouse Dreams of Cheese. I am familiar with Your Name. I'm not familiar with the other two, but Your Name is another phenomenal. That director, he makes some of like the coolest stuff too. Like if you liked the like simplicity of stuff in this one, Rob, the man who makes like Your Name and Suzume and all of those other ones, I'm forgetting the name of the director right now, but he has like beautiful backgrounds, like just breathtaking skies. Like I'll send you a picture because I'm telling you it's worth it.
But, yeah, it sounds like one of those like screensaver things that I could just like stare at for a while.
Exactly.
Nice. I'm not familiar with Dreams of Cheese, or I should say the Cornered Mouse Dreams of Cheese.
Yeah.
Adam, are you?
No, but I mean, just the name is intriguing to me.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm intrigued. But yeah, so the person who directed Your Name is Makoto Shinkai, and so he's got like 2 or 3 films that have came out that have been just really, really like. I'm talking when I was describing like screensavers and also just like beautiful stories behind them too. And he just came out with one last year called Suzume. That was really, really well done.
Well, on the flip side, the English voice that plays Shinobu is Manny Jacinto. Manny Jacinto is best known for his breakout role as Jason Mendoza on the NBC sitcom The Good Place. Jacinto has also had minor roles in Bad Times at the El Royale, Top Gun Maverick, and has also portrayed Kimir in the Star Wars series. Now, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but the Acolyte?
I think it's Acolyte.
Yeah. It's the Acolyte.
Yeah, man, I love him as Jason Mendoza. We just, my husband and I just rewatched The Good Place this year, and it's such a great show. And he's a really great comedy act. Also, but it's so jarring to hear him in this role, especially because he's playing a teenager, and I'm like, you're a grown man.
Well, I mean, like that's where you'll find him really jarring in The Acolyte, because he's playing a character that, it's canceled now. It was an okay show. It had some interesting things, but it, fell into the trap of Marvel, Star Wars, Disney blandness. But he plays a character that most of the time is viewed villainously, and is also just insanely jacked. Um, uh, Not jacked, but like ripped, and like, which you don't necessarily associate with Jason Mendoza from The Good Place, and his love of the Jacksonville Jaguars and all things Florida. So,
Lovable idiot. Yeah.
yeah.
He's so good. He's so good. But yeah, we've got a very interesting cast here from both sides of the coin.
Well, and one like just more like minor note on voice actors. The voice actor for the Suzu's best friend, Hiro-chan, in the dub is Jessica DeSico, who I know, there was a short-lived spin-off series of Emperor's New Groove called Emperor's New School, and she was one of the original She voiced the main original character that was kind of like the romantic love interest for Emperor Cusco in the series, and so that's what I mainly remember her from. So I was like, is one of the few names that is one of the names that jumped out at me, besides the ones we already talked about, as I was going through everything. Well, that's where we're going to have to leave things for today. Will Suzu be able to make her singing dreams come true? How does the Beast figure into all this? Will there be more talk about kayaking? Come back to part 2 to find out. That was the movie so far and our thoughts, but we want to know what you think. Tell us all the things we got right, all the things we got totally wrong, and everything in between. If you're watching on YouTube, you can do it in the comments. Spotify also has comments these days. If you're not listening to us on one of those, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Savage Movie Nights. That's Movie Nights with S at the end, which is different than everywhere else. Follow us on those to stay up to date on the latest with the show, and drop in the comments to share your thoughts. Thanks so much to our editor, Javi, and the entire Savage Content team. Thanks so much to my co-hosts, Rob and Kristen. Thanks so much to our sponsor, No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday. And most importantly, thanks so much to all of you for listening. Please give us 5 stars and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening or if you are watching on YouTube, give us a like, a follow, ring the bell, drop in the comments, all the good YouTube things. I've been your host, Adam, and we'll see you next time on the Savage Movie Night Podcast.